He walked into my life smiling, and then he sold my entire jewelry collection behind my back. Little did he know, I was about to make him regret it for the rest of his life. I can still remember the exact moment I noticed something was wrong. I had been cleaning the house that Saturday morning, humming softly to myself, when I went to the small safe I kept tucked away in my bedroom. It was a habit I'd had for years. Every Friday, I'd polish my rings, necklaces, and watches. But that morning, it felt off. The lock clicked a little differently. The door didn't resist like it usually did, and then I realized the jewelry wasn't there. Not a single piece. I froze. My heart thumped in my chest as a cold dread wrapped around me. I called out, "Logan?" My voice was steady, but my stomach twisted. "Where's my jewelry?" From the living room, he called back casually, "What jewelry, Mom?" His voice sounded normal, too normal. That was my first warning. I walked out slowly, keeping my tone calm, because I needed to hear it from him myself. "Don't play games with me, Logan. The jewelry I inherited from Grandma Carter, my rings, the necklaces, everything. Where is it?" There was a pause. Then he shrugged, as if it was nothing, as if it was all perfectly natural. "Oh, that. I sold it." I stopped dead. The words didn't register at first. My own son sold my family heirlooms without asking me? I felt the blood drain from my face. "You what? How could you?" My voice cracked, betraying the storm of anger and heartbreak inside me. I needed the money, Mom. Things are tight. I didn't think it was a big deal." His eyes avoided mine. Typical. He never looked directly when he was lying. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, louder this time, feeling every ounce of fury bubble up. "These were my mother's, my grandmother's. They're more than just jewelry, Logan. You can't just sell them." He tried to defend himself. "Mom, No, Logan. Just stop. Don't say another word." I couldn't even look at him without trembling. I walked back into the bedroom, shut the door behind me, and sank on the edge of the bed. My mind was spinning. I felt betrayed, shocked, and deeply wounded all at once. How could he do this to me? To us? To our family's legacy? I called Sophie immediately. "Sophie, I think my own son stole from me. He sold my jewelry." My voice was trembling, barely a whisper, but urgent. "What? Vanessa, are you serious?" "Yes. He walked in and casually told me he sold everything. I don't even know where he got the idea it was okay to do that. I feel sick." There was silence on the other end. Then she said softly, "Oh, Vanessa, I'm so sorry. But you can't let him get away with this. You have to do something." I nodded slowly, though she couldn't see me. She was right. I couldn't just sit and let him think it was okay to betray me like that. My mind started racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I decided to pretend everything was normal. I didn't want him to see that he had truly shaken me. Every time he walked into the kitchen, I smiled, I chatted, I laughed. But behind that mask, I was planning. I started paying attention to everything he did. Where did he go? Who did he talk to? I made mental notes of his friends, his habits, the stores he visited, and I started asking questions casually. "So Logan, where did you get the money for that new watch of yours?" He gave some vague answer, not noticing my subtle investigation. That was my opening. At night, I sat by the fireplace, going over every detail. I remembered the jeweler's name he had mentioned once in passing, Mr. Bennett. That's where I would start. The betrayal cut so deep, I felt every emotion: anger, hurt, sadness, disbelief. But as the hours passed, the anger morphed into a cold, focused determination. He thought he had won, that he could take what wasn't his and get away with it. Little did he know, Vanessa Carter does not forget, and Vanessa Carter does not forgive easily. I didn't want revenge to be about money. I wanted him to understand the weight of what he had done. I wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal reversed, just as I had felt it when he lied to me so casually, so confidently. I began planning quietly. Every detail mattered. I wrote down what he had done, every lie, every excuse. I made sure I understood exactly how he sold the pieces, who had helped him, and how much money had changed hands. Every step built the foundation of what was about to happen. I still remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, he won't see it coming. He won't know what's waiting for him. And with that thought, a small, almost imperceptible smile crept across my face, because I knew the tables were about to turn.
I had to act smart. Logan thought I was broken, thought I would just fume and forget, but Vanessa Carter never forgets, and Vanessa Carter never loses, not when it comes to family and justice. I started small, pretending to forgive him. Logan, it's okay. I understand things are tough, I said one morning as he sipped coffee, looking smug, like nothing had happened. I watched him carefully, noting every twitch of his face, every nervous glance. He believed he had won. That overconfidence would be his downfall. After he left for work, I called Mr. Bennett, the jeweler he had sold the pieces to. "Hello, Mr. Bennett. This is Vanessa Carter. I need to ask you a few questions about some transactions made recently," I said calmly, hiding every ounce of fury. There was a slight hesitation on the other end. He probably knew what was coming. Sure, Miss Carter. What do you need to know?" "I heard that some jewelry belonging to me was sold recently, and I want to understand the process. Can you walk me through it?" He began listing pieces and prices, unaware that I had already memorized every item, every serial number, every mark on my grandmother's heirlooms. The more he talked, the more evidence I collected. I also started tracking Logan's bank activity, casually asking about his purchases. "Oh, this new laptop you bought? How did you manage that?" He shrugged again, too casual, too confident, just saved a bit here and there. I knew he was lying. I could smell it in his tone, but I let it slide. I needed him to feel safe, to think he was untouchable. That way, when the time came, the sting would be far greater. Then came the hardest part. Patience. Every day I watched, every day I listened, every day I recorded in my mind the exact path to getting back what he had taken. I reached out to Sophie again. "Sophie, I need your advice. I can't confront him head on. He'll just lie, deny everything, and maybe even leave. I need to make him pay, but subtly, smartly." Sophie paused, then said, "Vanessa, you've got to hit where it hurts. Not just the jewelry, but his pride, his confidence. Make him realize he underestimated you." I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Exactly, pride. That's what he had too much of, and that's what I was going to break. Over the next few days, I devised a plan. I contacted Mr. Bennett again, this time under the guise of selling a few pieces I supposedly inherited from another relative. I wanted him to confirm all the details, to admit in writing how much the jewelry had sold for and who had bought it. Little did he know, he was giving me the final puzzle pieces to my revenge. Next, I created a fake online account, posing as a collector looking for rare jewelry. Logan, of course, couldn't resist bragging. "I sold that one for thousands," he'd say to his friends. And every brag, every casual lie was documented. I saved screenshots, recorded calls, everything I could use. I had to be careful. If Logan even suspected I was onto him, he'd cover his tracks. But he was too cocky, too careless. That overconfidence was my weapon. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I casually asked, "Logan, remember that necklace you sold last week? The one with the sapphire. How much did you get for it?" He smirked, not knowing I already had the exact figure. "Oh, about 20 grand, maybe 25. Why?" "Interesting," I said, walking away, pretending to be distracted by the stove. But in reality, I was already planning the next step. He had revealed too much. Pride and arrogance always do that. Over the next few days, I gathered all the evidence, receipts, messages, screenshots, phone calls, and even testimonies from people Logan had spoken to about the sales. I wanted the revenge to be complete, undeniable. He had taken my memories, my family's legacy. Now it was time for him to face the truth. I also subtly started planting hints that I knew more than I let on. Funny, isn't it, Logan, how people think they can lie and get away with it? Some secrets have a way of coming out. He laughed it off, assuming I was just being dramatic. That was exactly what I wanted. He had no idea the storm brewing quietly around him. One night, I sat by the window, looking at the moonlight reflecting off the city streets. My mind ran through every scenario. I had to be smart, precise, and patient. Revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about timing, control, and psychology. I wanted him to feel the same helplessness I had felt when I first discovered the betrayal. I rehearsed the confrontation in my head. Every word, every pause, every inflection. It had to be perfect. Too much anger, and he'd shut down. Too little, and he wouldn't understand the magnitude of his actions. And then I waited. Days passed. Logan continued living his life, oblivious, laughing, bragging. Every text he sent, every casual comment he made, only added fuel to the fire. And all the while, I was invisible, patient, calculating, ready to strike at the perfect moment. Finally, the day arrived. I had everything in place, the evidence, the witnesses, the confession I needed. And as I looked at him that morning, sipping his coffee, pretending everything was normal, I knew the time had come. He thought he was untouchable, that he had won. Little did he know, the moment of reckoning was right around the corner. Sitting in the quiet of the house, I whispered to myself, "Logan, you should have never underestimated me."
The moment had finally come. I'd held the cards for weeks, and now I was ready to play them. I woke up that morning feeling oddly calm, like the eye of a storm. Logan poured his coffee and hummed along to some song on the radio, completely ordinary, completely unaware. He kissed my cheek before leaving and said, "See you tonight, Mom." I watched him walk out the door and felt no anger, only a cold, steady focus. Today, he would learn that betrayal has a price. I started by sending a casual text to Mr. Bennett, the jeweler. "Hi, Mr. Bennett. I'm coming by today to look at some pieces I'm thinking of selling. Do you have time this afternoon?" I kept the tone breezy. He answered right away, eager, professional, unaware he was about to walk into the middle of my plan. Next, I called Sophie. "Everything's set," I told her. "I need you to be at the shop at 2 o'clock. Wear something nice and just act surprised, okay? I want people to see you as a real buyer." Sophie laughed, but I could hear the tremor of excitement in her voice. She was in, my only real ally. I also made sure Logan would be home. I texted him later, "Hey, Mom's making your favorite lasagna tonight. Can you be home by 7?" He replied with a thumbs up emoji and a cocky, "Of course, don't worry." Typical. He still thought this was about food. At 1:45 p.m., I walked into Mr. Bennett's shop carrying an old scarf and a small leather bag. The shop smelled like silver polish and lemon oil. He greeted me with a practiced smile. "Miss Carter, lovely to see you." I smiled back like a saint and placed the bag on the counter. "I'd like you to appraise these," I said. He opened it, and his expression shifted, just a fraction, because he recognized the cut of one of the rings. As he examined the pieces, I kept the conversation light, letting him talk. I asked the questions I knew would make him admit what he'd done. "You buy pieces from individuals?" I said, as is curious. "Do you ever resell them at auction?" He nodded, saying the usual things: market demand, provenance, price, paperwork. He had no idea he was revealing his own trail. While he was distracted, Sophie slipped in through the side door, glancing at me with that perfect look of astonishment I'd coached her on. She walked over, pretending to browse, then loudly gasped, "Miss Carter, are you selling Grandma's old sapphire set?" Mr. Bennett's face went pale. He stammered something about store policy and provenance, trying to cover his tracks. I let him flounder. That was the point. I had left a careful trail. Emails, a fake collector's inquiry, screenshots of Logan bragging to friends, the transaction records Mr. Bennett had given me when I'd first called under the guise of a different buyer. Every lie he'd relied on was now a chain I could pull. Then I asked the question he couldn't wiggle out of. "Mr. Bennett, you sold these pieces recently, didn't you?" He hesitated, then nodded, because the evidence I'd amassed would have made denial impossible. "Yes," he said, "but the buyer provided ID, and—" I cut him off with a small, controlled laugh. "Buyer? Who was the buyer?" He tried to give me a name. It was a name I already knew, Logan's friend, someone he'd mentioned in passing. That confirmation felt like a clean, surgical slice through the last of my doubt. I asked for the receipt. He slid it across the counter. And there it was in black and white. Dates, amounts, signatures. I held it like a trophy. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I collected the receipt and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," I said. "I'll be in touch." Then I left, Sophie at my side, both of us composed. The plan wasn't to punish him with anger. It was to force accountability, shame, and a lesson that would stick. That evening, I set the table, lit candles, and made the lasagna. Logan walked in smelling of cheap cologne and confidence. He kissed me, grabbed a plate, and sat down like a king returning to his castle. "This looks amazing, Mom," he said. "You outdid yourself." I smiled and served him, listening to his gossip about work, the new sneakers he'd bought, the new guy at the shop who'd given him cash. He was talkative, careless talk. Halfway through dinner, I placed the receipt in front of him, like a placement of a verdict rather than an accusation. He looked up, confusion, turning quickly to a flush of heat when his eyes caught the details. "What is this?" he demanded. The smugness dissolved. "You sold them," I said softly. "You sold them without asking me. You sold our family's memory." His face hardened. He tried to explain. Money trouble, pressure, a bad decision. His voice grew louder, defensive. "You don't understand. Rent is due. Bills." I listened, letting him speak, letting him expose himself with every excuse. Then I asked, "Do you remember telling your friend about selling like grandmother's ring? How much you got for it?" He said nothing. I slid a phone across the table and played a clip. The voice message he'd sent to a buddy, bragging about 20,000, about the sapphire and the chain. His cheeks went pale. The friends he'd boasted to were concrete, audible witnesses now. "You sold pieces that can't be replaced, not just because of the value, Logan, but because they held our history. You took that without asking." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He wasn't ready for accountability. He wasn't ready for the humiliation. But the plan had one more move. "I called the auction house," I told her. He looked at me as if I told him the sky had fallen. "They'll list the pieces next week, and I informed them there is a dispute over provenance. I have receipts, confirmations of sale, and a sworn statement from Mr. Bennett acknowledging who sold them." His hands fumbled for a fork as if it hutch. "You can go to them and tell your side," I continued, "or you can come home and face what you did." He swallowed, and for the first time that night, regret flickered in his eyes. It wasn't the kind of regret born from fear of consequences, but the kind that comes from seeing the person you hurt standing strong. Over the next days, rumors started. Neighbors asked questions. Mr. Bennett received a letter informing him I'd filed a formal complaint. The auction house delayed the listing after my evidence surfaced. Logan's friends started acting differently around him. He'd bragged openly, and now the same network saw the consequences. He called his boss and said he needed time off. He called his friends and received cold responses. The social humiliation was slow but real, and it stung the one place he'd relied on most, his pride. I didn't ruin him financially. That wasn't my aim. What I wanted was for him to understand the weight of what he'd taken, and for him to look at me with the same pain I had felt. One night, he came home and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Mom," he whispered, voice small and raw. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He looked older, like a child finally forced to face a parent's disappointment. I reached out and put my hand over his. "You broke something that mattered to me, Logan. You hurt me in a way I can't just sleep under a rug. But I don't want revenge to be cruelty. I want it to be a lesson." His shoulders shook. "I'll make this right," he promised. "I'll work, I'll pay back what I can, I'll help find the pieces, I let him speak. Then I set the conditions. Full repayment of the price the pieces had sold for, working extra shifts to cover it, and an apology video for our family. No, not public humiliation, but a sincere admission to the people he'd bragged to. And a commitment to counseling. Pride alone wouldn't fix what he'd done. Humility and action would. He agreed, solemn and defeated. Months passed. He worked double shifts, returned some of the money, and humbled himself in ways I never anticipated. Together, we tracked down a few items. Mr. Bennett cooperated after the complaint, feeling shame for his role. It wasn't perfect. Some pieces were gone forever. But what mattered was the change in him. Where once was arrogance, now was a careful, thoughtful son who had tasted real consequence. One evening, we sat on the porch with chamomile tea. The air was cool, and Logan's hand found mine. "Mom," he said slowly, "I don't expect everything to go back to how it was, but I want you to know I understand." I felt the truth in those words. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the start. I learned something in all of this. There is a line between justice and cruelty, and revenge can be a teacher if handled with wisdom. I wanted him to pay attention, to learn, to grow. I wanted him to remember not the humiliation, but the lesson. And so I let him rebuild. I let him face the shame he'd earned, and I let him earn back our trust, piece by slow piece. Some nights I still polished an empty ring, feeling the hollow ache. But other nights I saw small things, a ripple of care in how he treated his responsibilities, a phone call checking in without being asked, and I knew the lesson had worked. In the end, he learned that some treasures are priceless, and some betrayals leave marks that need work to heal. I got my revenge, yes, but not the kind that destroys. I gave him a path to become better, and in doing so, I found my own peace.